Welcome back to Teaching the Unteachables, where we dive into methods for teaching and learning for professionals like you. This episode brought to you by the National Oil Heat Research Alliance. Learn more at noraweb.org. One of the misconceptions that we hear a lot in the industry is decarbonization and electrification being held into the same teeter like they're the exact same component. And that's really not the scenario. So today we're going to spend some time with Bob O'Brien. Bob, how are you today?
Hey Clifton, how are you?
Fantastic, from N.O.R.A. And we want to spend a little bit of time helping clarify and understand what the decarbonization actually is, and understand that not all fuels are going away. We're not going completely electric. There are many ways to be able to complete this decarbonization movement. So if we spend a little bit of time talking about what decarbonization is, it is a global effort to reduce our carbon footprint. To be able to sustain the life that we know on this planet, we have to reduce our carbon emissions. Now, we have the ability to do that in many ways. Things like recycling and controlling waste and fuels and gases. But we also have the electrification, and now we have that component that is feared the most, especially by those living up in the Northeast, is what about fuel? Because not all regions of the world are right for heat pumps. Yes, we are building and we are sponsoring competitions for new technologies to be able to get higher capacity, lower ambient condition working heat pumps, but it's not exactly the solution for everyone. So, Bob, let's spend a little bit of time talking about your side of this effort, because there's a lot happening in your spectrum of the industry.
Sure. N.O.R.A. is the National Oil Heat Research Alliance. At this point, we're heavily focused on renewable liquid fuels, primarily biodiesel.
Right.
Renewable diesel to a somewhat lesser extent. N.O.R.A. is a congressionally authorized checkoff program, similar to most of the ones you're familiar with are probably agricultural, got milk, beef, it's what's for dinner, pork, the other white meat. N.O.R.A. is the same exact thing. So it's industry requested, industry funded. And there's three major areas of focus: technician education, consumer education, and research and development. All three of those at the moment are heavily weighted towards transitioning to renewable liquid fuels.
Okay.
Petroleum products have a finite lifespan ahead of them.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a limited amount of use. People don't understand that, we're starting to siphon off from that well that is not endless. So we have to be able to move forward as a planet, as an entire civilization, and look for our alternative fuel resources.
N.O.R.A. is National Oil Heat Research Alliance. It's congressionally authorized, so unfortunately there's no name change possible.
Right.
But we'd love to get away from oil heat to liquid fuels or renewable liquid fuels. Not much of a future in the oil heating business at this point, or any fossil fuel for that matter.
But there's still a lot of fuel oil out there. I mean,
5 million homes and businesses, which is it's a lot of work from anybody's perspective, even though it's a fraction of, nationwide.
The total industry.
Yeah, it's about 6
big.
or 7% of the, nationwide. They use it for both heating and domestic hot water, more heavily weighted into the Northeast, but it's scattered everywhere. States can opt in to participate in N.O.R.A. 23 states do participate in N.O.R.A. currently. So it's not quite half, but pretty close. Mostly Northeast, mid-Atlantic up through Maine. But there's pretty strong concentration scattered out in the Pacific Northwest. Alaska, obviously, quite strong.
Sure.
Yeah, it's tough to run a pipeline up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
A natural gas one anyway. But we're rapidly transitioning to renewable fuels, the moves away from heating oil. There's state mandates in a lot of the Northeast states, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and those are the heaviest users, the heaviest concentration.
Primary sectors.
Yeah. So biodiesel has been the main focus. It's a little more readily available.
Sure. Renewable
diesel, which they call it HVO in Europe, is kind of not reached the market yet, but it's hopefully going to be here pretty soon. So we're doing a lot of research.
Okay, so that's the Euro diesel that I keep seeing.
Yes, you'll see it talked about particularly in the UK.
Sure.
Yeah, it's heavily used here in California for transportation use.
Oh, okay.
But it's starting to work its way into the East Coast and into the heating market. So we want to be ready for it when it arrives.
Yeah, absolutely.
All these fuels aren't exactly the same as petroleum. So that's really the education efforts are focused towards the technicians to get them used to. It's not exactly the way it was. Pretty close, but not exact.
Yeah, here in the Midwest, so I'm in central Indiana, and fuel oil used to be utilized very heavily here, especially for farming purposes. A lot of grain bins were dried with, fuel oil tanks, and we still have some. So when I first got into the industry, we had some particularly old farms that still used a lot of fuel oil. So it is a industry that has changed, but is definitely still here. And so how do you supplement those fuels? We hear a lot about the diesel industry, for transportation and locomotion, but what about for heating in our residential and our commercial industrial applications? So we still have that entire sector that we have to cater to in this decarbonization movement.
Yeah, actually, Indiana is a state that participates in NORA. There are still quite a few oil-heated businesses and homes in Indiana.
Yeah.
And the biofuels really make it a nice circular economy for Indiana, where you do grow soybeans, not as many as Illinois or Iowa, but there's quite a bit of soybeans in Indiana.
Yeah.
So they could actually be grown, processed, and completely used entirely within the state. So it's an American product. It's a Midwest product, mostly soy, and canola or the feedstocks they use to produce it. So it's a completely circular economy in those states, in the Midwest states.
Okay. Now, so when we start talking about doing like retrofits, are we mainly talking about burner assemblies and orifices? Is that?
There's actually none. It's typically referred to by percentage. So when people say B20, B50, B100, B means biodiesel, and the number is the percentage of the fuel that is biodiesel. So B20 would be 20% biodiesel, 80% petroleum. B100 is 100% biodiesel. At the B20 level, there's really no changes at all. It's a drop-in. It's listed under ASTM 396, the spec for heating oil.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Up to B20. So there's really not much changes. All the burners available new on the market are already B20 compatible. So there's probably 400,000 or 500,000 of those 5 million using B20 at the moment. And the vast majority have had no changes whatsoever.
Yeah, that's
as the blend level increases, is where the differences become more pronounced. But at that level, it's minuscule.
Is it a BTU factor or is it a velocity factor?
There was slightly less BTUs per gallon.
Okay.
A little less than 10% difference in biodiesel versus conventional heating oil.
Makes sense. Okay. All right. So we're definitely seeing some transitions here in the Midwest. Definitely see them on different areas. We've kind of talked about this a little bit. We know that it is a checkoff program. So would you consider it a federal initiative for the oil sector?
The industry actually lobbied Congress to approve this. They're self-initiated. The chicken guys and the milk guys and the California cheese guys, they're in it too. Lobby Congress to have these checkoff programs created to promote the industry, to fund the promotion of the industry internally.
Okay. It's nice to see that it's actually designed from the ground up as a evolution to an industry.
Yeah, it's not from Congress down. It's from all these industries up. They're primarily agricultural. Bioheat's a trademark for blends.
Yeah.
Below B100, obviously. And it's about the benefits of approaching decarbonization by changing fuels rather than by going to a clean fuel rather than altering the whole system. In the Northeast, there's a lot of hydronic systems. It's heavily weighted towards hydronic. A lot of window shakers still here. A lot of old buildings, particularly in the cities, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, that long stretch there. These are tough buildings to decarbonize. They don't lend themselves to split heat pump systems very well. In Europe, they've been doing a hybrid with air-to-water heat pumps in the hydronic systems. They typically use lower water temperatures than we do here, unfortunately. They have radiant panel rads. Typically, we're in tube that needs higher water temperatures, so that's really not an answer for us. This makes it pretty easy for somebody to decarbonize at a minimal investment. And very rapidly. So the consumer education is focused towards that.
So that's where this conversation kind of started, looking through different topics that we need to cover. I seen an article from N.O.R.A. about the biofuels and the decarbonization efforts of N.O.R.A. And I went, wait a minute, decarbonization from a fuel oil perspective. Now I need to know more. And then because it really changes that philosophy of decarbonization. When we think about decarbonization, we think we're just getting rid of everything that's carbon fuel based and we're going with whatever we can to supplement that. But it's not the scenario. When we think about these boilers and these heating systems that were designed for specific temperature rises and volume of flow that cannot be done with some of these air source systems, exactly like Bob was just saying. And the cost of doing complete retrofits and redesigning these systems for higher BTU, higher capacity heating loads is not particularly feasible. may not even have the space to do such thing. So when we start talking about these alternative fuels, I had recognized biofuels in the agricultural because it's become very popular here in the Midwest for agricultural purposes, but I hadn't looked at it from the heating perspective. So it opened up my own perspective of what decarbonization is and the vast efforts that are happening right now from many different avenues. So it was very enlightening for myself. That's why I wanted us to talk about this and share it a little bit, because I've even had some of our own educators ask, well, what do we do about fuel oil? Am I supposed to really dump the entire fuel oil design system and go with a cold climate heat pump in the north? And I went, wow, that's a big investment, and that's a lot of redesign. So it opens up our thoughts a little bit to the options that we actually have. Because as an industry, we all have to do that. We keep talking about how much we need to impact the HVAC and refrigeration industry by using new technologies and new innovations. And this is to show that it really is in every sector of our industry, even the oil guys.
If you don't want to end up like Kodak.
There you go.
Right?
You have to evolve.
They held on to that film for way too long.
Where do we learn? Where do we become more familiar with, moving into these new types of fuels, Bob?
Sure. 1/3 of 3 of the legs of N.O.R.A, one of them is technician education, and probably the most important. So there's a 3-tier certification system. Mm-hmm. So this is in place nationwide. Entry level would be the bronze. It's a formal 80-hour class followed up by a test. Technicians who have 3 years experience and 100 hours of seat training, could be virtual or physical, doesn't matter, okay, are eligible to be silver certified, and gold would be 5 years of silver and 4 separate gold classes, kind of like grad level, very specific focus, combustion controls, airflow, 6-hour classes strictly on that one topic. There is a test for the bronze. It's a closed book test. The N.O.R.A silver certification is a license in the states of Vermont and New Hampshire.
That's what I was looking for.
As well as the county in New York. So we take the integrity of the test and the curriculum very seriously.
Sure.
These states would not accept this as a license if that were lax at all. So it's taken quite seriously. Passing, it's not a tough test, but passing is 78 for that reason, not a 65 or 70.
Sure.
Certification lasts for 5 years, and CEUs are required to renew.
Annually?
Over the 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so you need CEUs to renew it. Decision was made to go with CEUs versus retesting, which some people do, a lot of people do. Not much of a point in taking the same test over and over again every 5 years.
Just make sure you know what's new.
Yeah, and the CEUs are, can change day to day. We just feel it's really important that techs stay on top of this stuff, that the CEUs are very important to, continue education, to move forward.
Well, we look at some of the, comparable items. You look at your EPA 608. Unfortunately, a lot of times that's a one and done. So wherever you entered the industry and you acquired your 608, because there are not those continuing education units or that recertification, you're never really staying up to date what has changed based on those regulations. And so that is another sector of our industry I really hope to see change in the near future. And I know, you can go ahead and you can put it out there in the chat messages right now if you'd like to. You can start throwing the virtual hammer at me. It really is very important to have those continuing education opportunities so you can see what those changes are. I mean, think about that. If I would have taken that test and it was a one and done 30 years ago and I was still working in the industry, I may not even be aware of the changes for biofuels and the new technologies that are now becoming part of my daily routine in my career.
Absolutely. That's why the decision was made to require CEUs, right, and eliminate retesting altogether. So it's important. The instructors all have to be certified, and the instructors need CEUs also. Yeah.
That's a big reason for us hosting the National HVACR Education Conference, is to bring light to our educators. We're all educators. We've all been to this point where we've been in the field, we've gotten certified, we start teaching, and then at some point we go, do I need to go back and recheck on my certifications? Because I just had to do it for myself for my own electrical license. I couldn't find my electrical license, and I had to go, oh my. Have I paid my dues? Have I done my CEUs? And so I had to make a phone call for that. But the education part of it, that's why we all join together to be able to talk about the things that are happening in the industry, to be more aware of how we need to stay up with technology for an industry. I mean, think about these things that are changing. I didn't even know that we had these opportunities, these changes, these advancements in our oil industry until just a few weeks ago. And I had to go, oh my. I'm so far behind, I need to reach out. And that's how I found Bob. And that's how this whole conversation started. So we all need our continuing education for sure.
Absolutely. So N.O.R.A doesn't actually deliver this material ourselves. We have trade school partners, public high schools, for-profit trade schools, community colleges. There's state associations that run private trade schools. So we partner with approximately 50 or so across the country. We'd love to expand if anybody's out there and would interest in being able to add N.O.R.A certification for their students as a little value add. Love to have you. But we depend upon these partners, which is great. I mean, it's really the only way to do it, to spread it over such a huge footprint.
Absolutely.
A little bit of the drawback is the instructors themselves. How much do you really know about them? They have to be certified. We check them every so often, but we want to step up the level of that also. So most of them have come from the technical side. They've come out of the field. So they usually have great technical skills. They know the material. Classroom skills.
I got to deal with people now.
It's the
young
classroom skills. In some cases, may be lacking. So we're doing some work in that. But we partner with all these schools, and they're different constituencies. Public high school kids, we're really not going to do much with them. They're licensed by the state. It's a public high school. It is what it is in that situation. The state's vetting all these teachers.
Sure.
And they're high school kids. We can't treat them as we do the adults. So we're going to focus more of it on the adults, the community colleges and the trade schools. So this is a 2-week curriculum. Doesn't have to be done in one shot, but basically it's about 80 hours or so. So most of the 2-year community colleges just folded into their bigger 2-year. It's a couple weeks within their 2-year
within their program
or 18-month program. Yes.
Sure. Now, what about equipment? Are they actually working on live equipment?
One of the requirements to be a partner is that you have live fired equipment. You need hands-on. Would you want a surgeon who never was in the operating room, or a lawyer who never stepped foot in a courtroom? During COVID, it was great with the Zoom, but it really brought it home that this is a hands-on business. Yeah. And a lot of they're tactile learners. You need that hands-on. I think it's vital. So it is one of the requirements to be certified that there is a functioning piece of equipment. At least one. Most have, multiple, in some cases, dozens.
Now, you were mentioning earlier an opportunity to actually do some of the live fire at a conference and expo. Is that something that you host as well, additional opportunities?
Yes. In addition to the consumer education and technical education, research and development is a big part of what N.O.R.A does. And almost all of that research for the last 10 years or so has been focused on transitioning to biofuels, eliminating the technical barriers to adoption of high blends of biofuel. So as part of that, we have a quartz cylinder, which is basically a glass tube, but it's made of quartz, crystal clear, with a burner in it, and we can fire from different fuels on site. This is going to be the Eastern Energy Expo in May.
Ooh, boy, I like that idea.
Actually, some videos up on the website, too. You can see it from last year's, but we can transition, from fuel to fuel, from B0 petroleum to B5, 5% bio, B20, B50, and up to B100. We have a combustion analyzer on it, so the techs can see exactly what happens.
Differences in the fuel mixture.
Yeah, when you change this, the tubing's clear, so you can see when the transition happens.
Man, I want to see this myself.
You'll change it. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
it always draws a crowd.
If I'm a school and I'm looking for opportunities to expand and maybe become part of this program, is the best way through the website, or is it through contacting somebody direct?
They can contact me directly or through the website, either one. There's a tech school application box on the website.
Okay. Fantastic.
It's not that tough. We'd love to, especially in the states where we're underrepresented, we'd love to expand the footprint.
Sure.
And hopefully the schools would find it a benefit to offer certification to their students.
And education for those programs.
And
it's a biggie.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's 5 million out there. Somebody's gonna fix them.
They're going to be around for a while. All right, everyone, have a wonderful day. We thank you so much for spending your time hanging out with us. So thanks again. We'll see you next week.